So welcome everybody. This is Find My Team Conversations. My name is Barb Smith, and we have an awesome topic tonight with a great guest. And we're so fortunate to have this amount of experience on this conversation with us. So there's a Q&A at the bottom down there on your screen, hopefully. And if you have a question and want to send it through, please do that. When they're interactive, they're so much fun. So please use the Q&A, send messages through or questions, comments, whatever, and I will be the keeper of that, Beth, so you don't have to worry. And then we'll also send some things back out to you via the chat. So before we get started here, I'm going to introduce our guests, Beth Lorell, and we're very excited that she's got over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker. She's earned 2 masters, one from New York University and one from Drexel. And before private practice, she actually worked in the hospital, which I'm sure that's a very different setting. Northwell Health and Bronx, Lebanon Hospital. Is that 2 hospitals or 1?
It's 1 hospital.
One large hospital.
Bronx, Lebanon is 1, yeah.
Yes. She's also worked with residential and day programs in Philadelphia, and she advises organizations using a public health framework with a focus on awareness, education, cultural consciousness, and access to care. Now, you work with individuals, athletes, coaches, and groups as well. So you've got the whole ball of wax, so to speak. But as it relates to coaches, which is kind of where we're leaning tonight in tonight's conversation, although if you're a parent on this call or a student athlete, you're still going to get valuable information. What Beth teaches mental health awareness and communication strategies customized for coaches with the goal of creating a positive culture around mental health and prepare coaches to notice and respond effectively when they suspect a student athlete is struggling or in distress. And Beth, I'm going to share your website here, but I just want to read one thing that I got off of your website that I really think is critical to today's conversation. And it reads, an organization can champion mental health and promote a culture of well-being while running a thriving elite sports program. And this whole, elite sports program, top programs, more pressure, and all of that, sometimes the elite part of the athletic part takes over and we forget about this other very important piece of it, which is the mental wellness of athletes. So I'm so excited that you're going to be able to share with us all of your information and knowledge and experience and hopefully tell some stories even. But I want to welcome you to our Find My Team conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited for this conversation. It's an important one, and I'm really glad to be a part of this and to join you and Find My Team.
Well, you have to tell us at least one fun fact about yourself before we start drilling you with questions.
Okay, fun fact. So I cycled parts of the Tour de France route. Yes, that was one of my fun, challenging, grueling experiences in my life. So
was that in Catalonia?
It was in the Alps. I don't remember. It was years ago. I don't remember exactly,
okay.
But the Tour de France. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It was one summer, and we actually had the opportunity to. During the race was in action. I wasn't in it, but we were able to climb a hill, one of the mountains, before the race came through. So we climbed up and pulled over and kind of watched the race, go by. So
awesome.
Being a avid cyclist at the time, that was a thrill.
A cyclist, a runner. You played volleyball, basketball, softball, track, crew in high school, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so you're well versed as an athlete. All right, so first of all, just to kind of maybe lay the groundwork, just to put it kind of a picture in our heads about this, how prevalent is this? High school, college, athletics, how prevalent is this? Mental health issues? Yeah. And in
So,
particular, sorry to interrupt, in particular, we're talking about female student athletes right now.
right. So, in a word, extremely. In a few words, I'll tell you that, anxiety, depression, and suicide have been on the rise for years. And last year, the U.S. Surgeon General released a report on youth mental health. And in that report, it said that in 2019, 1 in 3 high school students and half of female students reported persistent sadness and hopelessness. And that's an increase of 40% since 2009. So in 10 years, 40% increase. And that was before the pandemic.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if they've been able to do that study. It might be too soon, but I was wondering, I'm sure it had to go up during that time for
Yeah.
both genders, but definitely for females.
Correct. Yeah, and across the board, mental health has been suffering, and from post pandemic as well. But adolescence, and that's high school and college is considered kind of older adolescent as well. They're in crisis. I mean, it's intense, and there are groups that are suffering more than others. So females are at higher risk for mental health distress. Racial and ethnic minorities and LGBTQ populations are at much higher risk for distress with their mental health.
So do you have a reasoning for that? Or is that just, some stats? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there are a couple things. I think you don't have to look too far, right, to know that the injustices, the racial injustices and the social injustices going on. That there's a tremendous amount of stress. There are biases and systemic issues going on that are really stressing people out, and access to care for a lot of some of these groups is limited, and getting proper care, meeting with providers who they can relate with. They're limited providers that have cultural diversity. Females, there's some literature out there, a lot actually, about the difference and why females are at higher risk, let's say, than males. And part of that, there's a kind of a biological component to that. And in brain studies, they have found that the way females process emotional information is different. So there are some real biological differences that do enhance the vulnerability for females.
It's unbelievable. I know just in the last 2 months, we've had 2 college athletes, female athletes, take their lives. One at Stanford and one at Wisconsin. And, it breaks my heart to see that, what sports is supposed to do is, build up confidence and build up self-worth and everything, and teamwork. And it just, for somebody to, have so much pressure or whatever it is to go that direction, it has to be, they have to feel so alone to get there. And I was reading a piece on the internet that suggested, and you may disagree or agree, that these kids, they could be surrounded by the best support ever, and they still can't. The mental disorder clouds that vision, and they still can't see all those people, so they still feel so alone.
Yeah, it's true, and and the number of people, the number of specifically, college student athletes we were just talking about, that have mental health difficulties is tremendous. And out of all of the collegiate student athletes that have mental health conditions, only 10% actually seek help. Only 10%. So that means most student athletes in college who are struggling with their mental health are not talking about it and are not getting help. And that's part of the reason why we're in such a crisis.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember as an athlete myself and as a coach that, if you were an athlete, you were supposed to be the mentally tough people who could take anything. So you weren't allowed and I put that in quotes because it really wasn't the case, but you felt like you weren't allowed to
Mhm.
suggest you had any issues with anything. You were supposed to plow through and, toughen up and all of that. And I can't imagine that. And this was 100 years ago. So, today's athlete has probably 10 times that amount of just pressure and pressure to perform, pressure to perform. And then there's this other piece of the transitioning, transitioning out of high school into college and or out of college into life. One of those transition is just going from a different level, hugely different level. And the other one is for most of these student athletes, they stop playing. So it's that,
Mm.
who am I outside of, an athlete?
Right. So the athletic, the identity. And when our identity is tied to just one thing, whether you're an athlete or not, if our identity is tied to just one role, then, we struggle when we don't have that role anymore. Or even if we do have that role, it's a very narrow view of ourselves, and our worth is tied to only one thing. And so it's dangerous. It's dangerous whether it's, I work, whether it's an executive or a stay-at-home parent or whoever it is, if that's your only identity, it's suffocating.
I did have a student athlete, this is at the college level, that pretty much had a mental breakdown, and she was the best player or one of the best players on the team, and she had a lot of pressure on her, and she wanted to work out every day, and we did. We worked out, you know, every day that we didn't have games, but outside of practice, we'd still work out. Just shooting, 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 shooting moves, and if she had a bad game, she would literally, and sometimes even after the little shooting practice, that was like a 30-minute to an hour deal, she would just bawl. She would just cry, and she just, if she had a bad experience on the court, she could not handle it, and it got worse. And now I'm looking back, going, oh, surely we didn't do enough. Surely, we didn't have even the knowledge that they have today, and definitely it wasn't something that people looked at as, we can hear, here's your sprained ankle, we know what to do. But when it's this, there is no protocol, there's just no knowledge about this as a coach. For me, that's what it was. And again, this is a few years back, but more than a few
Right.
years back, but still, it was a real thing.
Yeah, the whole mindset of sports was different then. It's starting to shift, but I think, there's work to be done. But the idea of, train harder, train longer, all of that that's how you get better. Just keep going, 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 and more and more and more. What we know now is that that can backfire, and it does not. That's not actually right the best way to improve or to sustain. You know,
So
personal.
in your experience, um, I'll just back us up just a little bit, but in your experience, is there one mental issue that is more prevalent than others for females, or a group of them that is more prevalent in females? And let's see if is there a difference between high school student athletes and college, or is it just really it's grouped?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for females, I mean, anxiety is rampant for sure. A lot of anxiety and and depression, and they often are together, are seen in the same person, so they often coexist. Um, I think the stressors are different in high school and college, but similar. I think a big piece of it is the stress of, I think, for especially for females, when we talk about the social media has a disproportionate negative effect on females versus males when it comes to body image. So I think girls and athletic girls, and specifically females in sports that focus on aesthetics, if you will, tend to have higher rates of body image issues and eating disorders. And I think that follows through often from high school, high school to college. There's a sort of an anecdotal little report I read. There was a female college athlete who sent 75 surveys to her teammates and to other collegiate athlete friends of hers. And what she found from the results was that most of the people that respond, most of the people who were depressed, all except like 2 or 3 who were depressed in college, did not experience that in high school. And the transition and the adjustment to college exacerbated it. So there's, sometimes, there's not that follow through. Sometimes, that transition is a real serious, could be a real serious trigger. But high school has its own social pressures, and, beyond the pressures of sports and academics and social pressures, a lot of people have trauma in their lives, unresolved trauma from earlier years, or even living in a home where there's trauma, which can come in the form of, even divorce, of substance abuse in the family, of loss. There's many different, aspects to that, and it affects, males and females.
Sure. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some signs that coaches could actually look for? Because, as a coach, you're into the next game and practice, and, the season when it hits, it goes fast. And some people have, depending on what level of college that they're in, they have this extended, either they get them all the time, or it's broken down. They have, built-in breaks for the student athletes. High school is the same thing. You have your high school season, and then you have pretty much travel ball the rest of the time, unless you're playing more than one sport. So what are some signs? Those are a lot of different opportunities, obviously, but the signs are probably the same throughout.
Yeah, some of the basic kind of observable signs of mental distress are withdrawal from socializing, right? If someone usually after practice kind of hangs out with the team and hangs out with their friends a little bit, and you notice that they don't, or if they're showing up late and kind of they're carrying themselves differently, the body language, you can see just kind of a shift in the visible posture. Negative self-talk. If you hear somebody really putting themselves down and really beating themselves up for a bad play or an error or a practice that didn't go well, the really intense kind of bashing themselves is something to be aware of. Mood swings, conflict with others, with coaches, with teammates. But many times there are no visible signs. And, I'm thinking about these recent tragic suicides on college campuses that, we've spoken about. And there are so many times when there's a suicide that occurs and the response is shock. We had no idea. She looked so happy, right? He was the life of the party. She had so much going for her. He was a star. Nobody knew. Nobody could see it. So that's one of the challenges, is that we can't see all of the signs, so we have to ask. We have to talk. And because, everybody's going through something. Everyone's going through something. And we have to be able to look at athletes as people. They are people. They are humans with a full range of emotions that we all have. And yes, they're athletes and they're super talented. But first, they're people. And so we have to be able to, again, shift that perspective that they're not superhumans. They're super talented, right? But they're not superheroes. They're heroes maybe in some ways, right? But they're people, and they're people first. So we have to start treating them and looking at them as people first, asking. And, when I think about that, these suicides and crises that are happening, a person isn't suicidal forever, right? They progress from feeling something off to becoming suicidal, right? We don't go from 0 to 60 without first going through 10, 20, 30, 40. So we have to know in each other and in our athletes, what does 10, 20, 30 look like? And it might not be visible to us, but that's again why we have to talk and ask. Tell me, what's it like when when you're happy? What do you look like? What happens when you get sad? What do? You know, having those conversations and being able to have these young athletes even identify for themselves what they should recognize and how a coach might be able to notice something.
I think, you know, I think there are a lot of coaches who are really, um, I don't know what the right word is, but nervous about, almost eggshells around all of the issues that are out there. So there's so many things going on. I mean, for the coaches too. I mean, mental, anxiety and depression and those things are have to be prevalent even in that age group or collective group or whatever. But how can they, this is what this is about tonight, be empowered. How can they feel safe to ask questions without, you know, overstepping some line or um, saying something wrong?
Yeah,
Do you have some good like tips for them on that?
yeah. I think it's important to do really even more listening than talking, right? Ask a question and listen. That's really what engages people and allows them to open up when they're feeling distressed. So being that ear. And I think it's it's not just stepping in when you notice someone's in distress. It's really being in it all the time, being connected all the time by having regular conversations, even when things seem to be going well, because we know just because someone appears to be smiling on the outside, they might not be smiling on the inside. So being able to have these conversations, and to know that, as a coach, your role is not to analyze or to treat or to diagnose. It's to just notice what's going on. And once you notice, then it's about learning and knowing what are your options. And so part of that is knowing what are the resources available to you on your campus, in your school, in your department. You should always have someone you can go to ask and to say, hey, I'm concerned about Sally. This is what I'm seeing. Can you advise me? So you shouldn't have to feel like you're doing this alone. So that's an important piece. And it's about recognizing. And I kind of follow this acronym it's TEAMS, TEAMS. And it starts with tuning in, which is, like we said, just listening, observing, noticing, kind of just absorbing as much as you can about each person. And then there's expressing empathy. So you notice someone's a little down or you notice something, to be able to say, hey, I don't see you smiling the way you usually do. You want to talk about it. Something, gentle. Then it's acting with compassion, right? Which is putting our empathy into action. And being able to, again, to say, I'm here for you. Let's, let's talk. Or what, if they're stressed about their overscheduling, let's pull out your calendar. Let's take a look at it. Let's see where we can help manage things. Then it's making connections. And that is when a person needs to be linked to professional support. So the role as connector is very important. Not everybody will need that. Some people might just need some supports and TLC, some time management, some talking. Not everybody's going to need professional support. But if they do, those steps leading up to it, having the regular conversations, the empathy, that will bring the trust, so that if the coach suggests, what I'm thinking that it might be, helpful to talk to someone who's an expert, someone who knows who's dealt with this before, and they are more likely to kind of trust that process and accept a linkage. And then showing support is the S, and that is, really showing support the whole way, but especially once someone is engaged with mental health support, whether or not they're active on the team, staying connected, showing support, and that they're still valued members of the team. So that's kind of a very quick overview of some quick tips of how to approach it. But I think boundaries are key, and knowing what support is available for the coach. Who can you go to? What? Yeah.
That's a
I would
great,
say
great analogy there, or acronym. That's huge. I'm sorry I cut
yeah.
you off.
No, I was going to just refer back to what you said about coaches' well-being and mental health, and that's huge. It's huge because there's a lot of pressure on coaches, and I've even read that the stress on coaches is even greater than that on the athletes, and that coaches need support. And we talk about identity. Coach is more than just a coach. They're people, right? You're people, and being able to recognize your value beyond that. But there's a lot of pressure, right? There's stats, and there's funding, and there's sponsors. There's a lot of different pressure on coaches to make make
No
numbers
doubt.
as well.
No
So,
doubt. No doubt. I
right.
can relate to that tenfold right there.
Sure. And the other piece is coaches are your role models, right? And your influencers. So being able to take care of your own mental health and to share that with your team and say, hey, you know what? We got a big game coming up. This is what I'm feeling. I'm feeling a little jittery and nervous and a little worried. And here's what I'm doing about it. So being able to share that and have that conversation and say, how are you guys feeling? How are you ladies feeling? And what are you doing about it? And even doing some team meditations, doing team conversations
Yeah.
around well-being and mental health.
So let's say, Beth, that there's a coach, and he or she has the team, and there is a student athlete who might be a little bit off, acting a little bit differently. But let's say they're at the 10 and not the 60. At what point does a coach? I mean, as first signs as a coach, like we gotta do something, or is it? You're trying to just be there, be there, be there. It's getting worse. Be there, be there, be there. Getting worse. Or at 10, do you say we've got to start calling somebody? And then do we call the parents? Do we get the administration? Is it just a mental health professional? Some schools have them, some don't. So,
Yeah.
what are the steps? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of it depends how we define 10, 20, 30. But, when I think of a 10, I think of someone who's feeling distressed, but, obviously not in crisis, and someone who really could use a conversation, right?
Yeah.
So, taking, a walk after practice, or just kind of come, let's, help me put some of the equipment away, and then you have a chat. So it's really just, and being able to say what you're noticing, not accusing anybody of doing anything wrong or doing anything weird. It's just here's what I'm noticing, what's going on. So really just showing that you care, because that's what people want. They want to know that they care. That reminds me of a story. This is a young male athlete in high school, and I was seeing him, and he tells me that he's here. His coach approached him several times. You okay? Are you okay? And he said, I was determined not to tell him what was going on. So there's no way, no how. The coach kept at it and kept asking and kept asking. And he said, I realized the coach actually really cared. And I also realized if I didn't tell him, I'd never get him off my back. so they talked about it. And what he said is when he finally did tell the coach what was going on, he felt so relieved. And it was immediately just, and then they talked, and they together decided it would be helpful for him to speak to someone specifically about what's going on, who can help him through it. And he was just so grateful that the coach persisted. Another piece of that one is actually the parents did contact the coach and let him know that they were going through a divorce and that their son was having a tough adjustment to that. and wanted him to just be on the lookout. So he wasn't particularly tuned, he was tuned into that.
Right.
And
Good communication.
continue to follow through. We don't always have that, but when there is that communication, that can be super helpful.
What if could it go reverse too, where the coach is seeing something and calls the parent and says, I don't want to alarm anybody, Joe or Jill, or they're just a little bit off or something. Can they feel comfortable doing that? Obviously, there's hopefully some relationship built up there first, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it is really important to, in most cases, to involve parents early on. I think it depends on the situation. There might be extreme circumstances where it's not safe, or where it may not be in the best interest. But in general, the more adult support a child has, the better. I think what I think can be helpful too is to first talk to the athlete, the student, and
Sure.
say, what's going on? Here's what I'm seeing. You look a little off, whatever it is, being able to have that conversation. And what I've done, just even in my individual work, is I've said, here's what I'm seeing. I think it'd be a good idea to let your parents in on this. So what do you think about that? And try to involve them in the process of telling their parent what's going on, so that they feel part of it and they have agency. They have, they're empowered to do that, and they don't feel kind of pushed around, not, or
Sure.
infantilized, that they can.
Sure. And is there ever a time where, now this is probably, well, actually, high school or college, where a coach really should go to the administration and talk about this?
Yeah, and I think, the first thing that every coach should do is, again, know what their policies and practices are. When is it stated that you're supposed to go to administration? So knowing what the regs are, for sure. And I think, hopefully, ideally, anytime a coach feels uncertain, they have that person to go to. They can talk to their administrator and say, here's what's going on. I could use some guidance to be able to do it that way. And that there is the issue of confidentiality and certainly respecting privacy. Safety comes first. So there have been times when I've had to make calls that were, I was asked not to, but I did anyway, because safety was at risk. So,
Sure.
all bets are off when it comes to that.
Yeah, here's another. I think for coaches, anyways, this is maybe an obstacle that maybe we can talk about tonight. But because of the privacy, you just mentioned this. Coaches, in particular in college. I'm not sure about high school, but I'm pretty sure it's probably the same. That you're not allowed to be shared any medical information. It's very separate. So a student athlete could be on your team having these issues. You might even know about them, and you don't know if they're seeking help, or you don't know any of that because it isn't supposed to be shared with you. So that's angst in itself, because you feel like you're not able to either help the person, or you don't know where it's going because you're not informed enough. Many colleges have sports psychologists, so if there's an issue, they go there, and none of that gets shared with the coaches.
Right. Yeah, and I can see how that is anxiety provoking, and I think the first thing that comes to mind is, can you talk to the person, and if they can tell you themselves. Another provider can't, another staff person can't tell you, but they can certainly tell you. So if you have that relationship, if you can develop that relationship, and not force that, and not pester them about it, but hey, I'd like to know what's going on with you. I want to, and tell me about your health, or can you tell me about, what are your challenges, and how can I support you through that? And that may be uncomfortable to ask those questions. It might be uncomfortable. And you have to know the person. It's very individual. There might be some people you don't want to do that with. So this is all very, very specific to the person you're dealing with. But in general, if we can develop that relationship where people feel safe and comfortable to share what's going on, then we have an environment that really can support the whole person. If we have everything is siloed and the things are fractured, right? This health is here, this health person is there. We don't see the whole person. So as much as we can, look at the whole person and learn about them, the better able, we are to help them and connect.
Yeah, I think two things that you said about this is, the relationship between a coach and player is so important. And there are a bunch of different ways to relate to players. Um, and so some coaches are more standoffish.
Mhm.
Some head coaches really don't get too involved in the players, but the assistants do. And or some coaches are right in there as head coaches. So there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but the relationship has to be there for this to work. And the second thing, the communication about mental illness in general,
Mhm.
if we can stop stigmatizing it,
Right.
it would be easier for kids and coaches to talk about it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and I think actually one way to help break the stigma when we're talking about sports is for coaches to take a lead in talking about mental health. And now I know, mental health is not a traditional part of coaching, but it's a necessary part of it. And just because things haven't been a certain way doesn't mean they can't be that way now. And I think, things are evolving, times are changing, and this is something that is here to stay. Mental health is a part of health and performance. It is not separate. It is a part of it. And if we neglect that, then we're neglecting the people. We're neglecting the athletes, the students, the youth, our colleagues.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, as a coach, every 2 years we would have to get recertified in CPR and first aid. Every
Mhm.
2 years. So you'd go through the class, and we always used to laugh about it, going to our, CPR and our
Yeah.
first aid. But there should be, or, somewhere along the line, there should be a mental health, like, certification of some sort. And I don't know if
Mhm.
I don't, we can't make everybody health professionals on coaching staffs, but you do need these basics like you're talking about,
Yeah.
that could just be
Yeah.
a little certification like they do those other physical,
Yeah.
the physical things that you can see.
Yeah. And that is actually, it's out there. It is out there. They have, mental health first aid in different type of organizations that do that. Um, it's a matter of getting it rolled out as widespread as we can. And it's about a culture change
Yeah.
within sports, and it's about redefining what strong and brave are, right? And it's been that to be strong and tough, you hide your emotions and you just tough it out through pain, and then you just kind of that's strong and tough. But really, to me, what's brave and courageous and strong is facing the emotions, not hiding them, bringing them out. That is hard, much harder than hiding in some ways.
Right.
So that's the work, is really shifting this concept of what it is to be a strong, tough athlete, right? There's this, the emotional side of things are often called soft skills, right? The empathy, that I think really is part of why it's all stigmatized. It's not soft skills, right? Without those skills, we can't be, um, strong and productive. And so it's about really shifting the focus to what skills we really need.
Yeah. So is there like like a mental health um, plan, like a crisis plan? Is there something out there that we could either, I'll send it, through the emails out to people, or um, in a chat, that is just like a template of, this is how you can approach this with your team and what you can say, and this is how you build this, your own plan, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I think the plan in some sense needs to be specific to each organization and each department. Like what are their policies? But there's certainly, tips out there on how to, right, how to approach, like what to say, what to look for, how to approach, kind of like a cheat sheet, if you will. I think is, I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking at, but something to help guide people,
Yeah, yeah,
guide
it'd be
coaches
that. It
what
would be
to
that.
say.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just a, if there's a fire drill in the school, these are the things you do.
Right, right, right.
There's a mental issue or a mental, and it's like it's probably different for every issue. Even I'm not even sure, but is there something like
Yeah.
that? Fire plan, fire escapes.
Yeah. Yeah. Stop, drop, and roll. Right. So,
Exactly.
so, so,
Way to practice that stuff.
my version of that is the Teams acronym I use. So that's kind of what I use to kind of, it doesn't have, that, well, I guess that it isn't specific necessarily. It's not specific to each, every organization again has their own, so it's not individualized, it's general. But certainly, there are things out there if I don't have, I can find, if you'd like to send that out.
Yeah, if there is something like that, I'm going to
Mhm.
send your thing out too because I think that's so relevant. The Teams acronym.
Yeah.
Um, but is there a let's say a coach isn't very good at communication, and they don't get involved in their players' personal lives. Let's say they're hands off there and they kind of stay distant and they're just on the court. Um, and this is a style. This is who these people are. So it's a style of coaching. What would you recommend then in terms of the mental health of the student athletes?
I think that coach would benefit and the student athletes would benefit if that coach had training, had some support, had some guidance, and someone to say, you know, we're shifting a bit, right? The coach's role is so critical to the health of these young athletes that there's no separation between person and athlete and mental health and physical health. It's all one. And so it's about creating a new perspective, and it's being able to. It's hard, but it's again it's a culture shift, and it's about kind of managing change, which um, is hard but important.
Yeah, and I think this is just a sidebar because I'm thinking as we're talking here, but most head coaches have assistant coaches, and usually kids are many times more likely to go to the assistant because they don't have the hard hat that says you can't play on. They don't determine playing time or who gets to start or who gets to play the most minutes. So the head coach, it's harder for student athletes sometimes to go to that person. And if they can't go to that person, they've got to go to somebody. And so even empowering your assistant coaches, if you're the head coach, to
Oh,
understand what you're
100%.
talking about, and that way you can kind of corral, so to speak, the student athlete who's in distress and say, hey, I can't get to her, but you can.
Yeah, and I should specify when I kind of use coach, head coaches, assistant coaches, associate head coaches, it's all leadership, all leaders. It's they're influencers. But I think also this is part of the culture shift, which is for coaches to be able to tell their athletes um, that coming out and talking about a struggle isn't weakness. It's okay. You're not going to get benched for having a bad day in emotionally. It's okay, so being able to and it might take some coaches some time because they might not actually um, really believe that, right? We all have our own beliefs, and so the idea that talking about being sad or anxious isn't weakness is hard for some people to grapple with, and I get it. So there's a process to this. You can't just say, all right, suddenly change your views. There's a whole process of education and awareness and culture change. But for athletes to know that that they are human and they do not need to suffer in silence, because it's not healthy and it's not productive for performance either.
Right.
You know.
Right. So the two scenarios that we had, first at the very beginning, we talked about this. There's so much pressure now on student athletes, and that one in the transition piece. So let's start with the so much pressure. How can a coach, because coaches, they blanket the pressure. I don't know that they put more pressure on this one than this one and that sort of thing. I think it evolves because of playing time and positions and those sorts of things, or end of game, who's in. How can a coach, be their demanding self and put pressure on, and competition and challenges within the team, and still be aware of, there's pressure here. There's mental issues that we have to also think about.
Yeah, a lot of it is choice of language and how you speak, how they speak, and I've had this discussion before, right? How can I demand, hardcore performance, and how can I rally them up and be empathetic, right? How do I, right? So you can
Right.
do it all, and it's really about finding your own style. Really, it's about integrating mental health awareness into coaching that matches your style. So that might mean adjusting some things, right? Some of the language, and are we yelling at people, or am I speaking with them? And what actually motivates people is not yelling at them. It doesn't actually do it. When someone makes a mistake and makes an error, how do you respond to that, right? And we all get upset and frustrated and yell or stomp our feet, and that's understandable. But also being able to say, you know what, I love the way, after mistake, right? I love the way you refocused after the turnover. Or I love the way you supported Sally after the error. So it's also being able to support during those rough moments, and be firm, be strong. Set your demands and expectations. Be you, but maybe tweak it and bring in that awareness, and recognizing that really people don't like being yelled at.
Yeah.
You can raise your voice, you can be firm, but if you're yelling at someone versus inspiring them, right? Yelling isn't often inspiring.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a huge difference, and some kids say they want yelling, and some kids say they want a little bit more, a little less yelling. So there is that, but like you said, you kind of have to know your people,
Right.
and if all you're doing is yelling, it ends up,
Right.
not being heard anyways. But if you yell once in a while and really make a point or something. But I like your idea of inspiration versus just yelling. Are you inspiring? Are you
Yeah.
motivating? Or are you just, knocking them down?
Yeah. And if
And
all
most of them
person
are
is
already, sorry,
sorry, go
most of
ahead.
them are already knocking themselves down when they make
Right.
mistakes.
Right.
Go ahead, I'm
Right.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say that it just slipped my mind. I'll come back to it.
Not to worry, not to worry. Okay, well, the second one was now transitioning. So,
Okay.
now you're a coach, you've got a group, and, let's just say, first of all, they're high school coaches, high school kids. They're going to transition into something that they've never experienced before, in terms of the amount of change, the amount of, so much more is going to be required. How can a high school coach prepare a student athlete, or at least do some of that preparation? It takes a lot more than that, but how can they, what tools can they give these high school female student athletes now going to college to play?
Yeah. I think it starts with modeling taking care of their own well-being and mental health, and really showing their student athletes how important it is to take care of mental health. by talking about it, by saying, hey, this is what I do. But I, and some disclosure, I think is really helpful. When a coach can kind of disclose a bit. And that story I told you about the athlete whose parents were getting divorced, one thing the coach said to him was, my parents got divorced when I was around your age, so I feel you, I got it. So that kind
Yeah.
of connection can be really powerful. So I
Yeah.
think it's developing the tools to take care of themselves, to recognize when they're starting to feel uneasy or stressed, how to manage that. That's a big piece. How to take care of themselves with nutrition and sleep. Sleep is huge, and often underrated, and we don't get enough of it.
Right.
So it's modeling just taking care of themselves. I think it's for coaches being able to talk to their athletes as more than just athletes. What did you do this weekend? What kinds of things did you do over the holiday break? What do you enjoy? Really getting to know and helping to highlight that they are more than just an athlete. That's part of who they are, but getting to know what's their role in their family. What do they do for fun?
It might be the same also for the coach that's now helping a student athlete transition out away from sport. It's the last game. It's the last opportunity. There's no more organized, high school or college
Right.
sports. Um, I'm sure there has to be some, as it's coming closer, there's more pressure, there's more angst, there's more, who am I going to be? What am I going to do? Are there things coaches can do to help uh, diminish or lessen that realization?
Yeah. I think the key is to start preparing early. It's to start well before the transition begins. It's to start, freshman year of college or high school, talking about, right, just developing the sense of identity, and the reality that, from high school, how many actually go on to play college, and from college, how many, right? So the reality that it's going to end, taking away from as much of it as you can, taking the beauty of it and the experience, and really being present. The more when people know it's going to end also, or anticipate it, really being present and absorbing as much of the experience as you can, um, and developing other parts of themselves early.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then having mentors and being able to talk to others who've gone through the transition, people with that same lived experience who can speak to, people directly, and who've gone through it.
Yeah, I don't know sometimes. I mean, I know coaches know that they, influence and can make a difference, but the length of that influence, there are things, I don't know if this happens with you, with high school coaches or whatever, but for my high school coaches, my college coaches, they would say something that sticks with me still today. And so their influence lasts way longer than the 4 or 2 or 5 years that they get with them,
Mhm.
in their seasons, in their high school and college, and even their club seasons.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's such an important role, and it's a precious role, and it can be overwhelming. And so coaches need support and deserve it, because coaches I mean, just like, we think about, teachers and educators that shape children, and they're so do coaches at every stage, high school, college. Coaches are incredibly powerful in terms of their influence, and it's a lot of pressure and
Yeah,
stress.
I'm just putting your link in here so that our um, panelists can have it.
Okay.
Um, if you're a coach, what are some things you do? You're it's so fast when you're a coach. You're getting ready, as I was saying earlier. You're getting ready for the next game, the next tournament, the next practice. You've got crisis over here. You've got crisis there. You have booster people here, and you got administrators here. You know, we they may only have 30 seconds or a minute or what are some tools, what are some things they can do to just
Yeah.
you know be able to get rid of the load that they're carrying, um, and maybe refocus.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think first, it's for a coach to be able to identify really who am I besides being a coach, and spend some time outside of that, giving your mind a break from coaching, right? So that's important to kind of give some space. And I think also scheduling, building in time, whether it's 30 seconds or 30 minutes to do something, whether it's a meditation or if someone, if it's art or music, something to help release and kind of refocus and reboot. But I think it's really important to not just say I'll squeeze it in between these things when I have time. It's making an appointment and viewing it like a health appointment, like a medical appointment. Because in essence, that's what it is. If we don't schedule time for ourselves, we don't put that slot on the calendar for ourselves, that time will be used in a doctor's office or waiting online for the pharmacy. So it's taking that time, and we decide, how do I want to use this time, for myself, or do I want to go to the doctor because I haven't taken care of myself at this time.
Right, right. That's an excellent point. Excellent point.
It's
And I know
being
we're running out of
intentional.
time here,
Mhm. Yeah.
so I want to just get this. I got your
Okay.
thing in there. I want to get my find my team link in there as well, so people, if they want to check
Okay.
out more about find my team, um, just whatever we can do to help. We're always trying to find ways to help female student athletes. Right now, that's where we're
Yeah.
living, because I've coached there for 30 years. But really just to empower coaches to understand their athletes, and really, to
Yeah.
help maybe make this more of a priority and bring it out in the open, and not be so help our student athletes not to be so ashamed and scared, and um, feeling alone. I know a lot goes into that, but what you brought today is so helpful and valuable, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us here, and thank you to all people that came. Um, and this will be reloaded on YouTube at some time down the road here, so it'll be out there if anyone wants to share it, or share it with coaches, um, and just keep the word, keep it going.
Thank you for having me. This was really a special conversation, and I'm glad to be a part of it.